everybody to our Perspectives on Youth webinar. Perspectives on Youth is the series of EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership where we explore new, emerging and upcoming topics in the youth field, as well as topics which might not be fully explored through research yet, but are on the minds and in hearts of young people. Today, we are speaking about young people's social rights, focusing especially on two topics or two parts of social rights, that is housing and access to housing for young people across Europe, as well as new trends in working and employment, and particularly co-working spaces. So I have a pleasure of introducing our two facilitators who will be guiding us today through this process. This is Martina Makul and Alexandra Maljiski, who have been working with us this year on different articles, videos, and webinars for Perspectives. So I pass the floor to them to introduce our speakers today and the topic for the day.
Thank you very much, Lana, and hello everyone also on my behalf. So as Lana already mentioned, today's topic is about young people's social rights, and we will be exploring it from these two perspectives of, on one hand, access to housing, and on the other, co-working trends. For that, we will be referring to two articles that were just recently published on Perspectives on Youth, that we will be also briefly introducing today, and that the conversation we will have will be based on. And we also invite you to read the full articles on Perspectives on Youth as well. You can find them on the Facebook page of this event.
So the authors of the two articles were Antigone Papageorgiou, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Pantheon University, and Chloé Sermet-Morin from FEANSA, the European Federation of National Organizations Working with the Homeless. Unfortunately, for health reasons, they cannot be with us today, but we have with us Panagiotis Chatzimichail. Panagiotis is also known as Pete. He's a board member of the European Youth Forum, and following his studies in political science, he invested his focus on advocacy, youth policy, and within the European Youth Forum, he advocates for youth rights with a focus on the future of work and social inclusion. We also have with us Edo Sadikovic, co-founder of Sende and Village Nomads.com. He's a social entrepreneur with an interest in conflict resolution, peace building, and entrepreneurship from tiny villages.
Yes, and to kickstart our discussion, we would like to first take a look at what do we actually consider by social rights. So to give a bit of a broad idea of this topic, we would like to address our first question to Pete and to ask what do we consider by social rights, and what aspects of young people's lives are actually covered by this, and what does the European Youth Forum do on these topics?
Well, I'm quite sure, first of all, hello to everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation on behalf of the partnership, but also as being vital partners to us, the Youth Forum. I think it's quite important for us to be together at this moment. What do we consider social rights? In the concept of seeing the work and connection of the community itself, we need to understand that both the Council of Europe and the EU have really clarified or built in the aspects of social rights, basically connecting either to the Council of Europe, to the social rights of young people, and the conventions on there on the fundamental rights, but also from the EU, thinking about the Gothenburg summit, but also the Porto summit, clarifying and putting points down connected to the social aspects of our lives, and how those rights are being put together and passed through the agreements of the institutions. But to be actual and to understand better what we mean by that, it's basically the connection of parts of our our lives, connecting to our work, to our education, to our interactions and social beings. And from that point on, seeing how we can excel and have a normal life, and a life that we can feel to our full potential as young people, but also as people in general. I'm not going to list all social rights to this point, but I think it's very important to understand that there are agreements between states. There are a lot of civil society organizations choosing to highlight their work on aspects or parts of social rights, like us, the Youth Forum. When it comes to what we do as a platform to address social rights and social inclusion, we have board members following up closely this process, like myself, focusing more on employment and the future of work, but also Maria, my other fellow board member, which focuses on social rights and social and economic inclusion in the part of really helping member organizations to identify problems or progress happening within these aspects in helping and really advancing youth rights in the part of social aspects of them, of course. And on the other side, really working with institutions in promoting how to better build a strong framework around social rights, but also making people aware of their existence and the obligations that member states have versus the obligations or, let's say, rights and access to them as citizens. And from the other point, see how we can really support all these different stakeholders, the member states, the international institutions, the regional, and ourselves as civil society, in really building up the system to be more inclusive, but on the other side as well, building up the infrastructures that allow access, that allow protection, and that allow promotion of the settings of these rights. That would be from my side, for now at least.
Thank you, Pete, for this introduction and allowing us to understand a bit better what we mean by social rights. Alexander, I think we can pass on presenting perhaps the two articles. We will start first of all with the article related to co-working. So as we've said before, we have asked Antigone Papageorgiou, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Panagiotis University, to write an article on the emerging trends in co-working spaces among young people. So Antigone actually addressed the topic, identifying a couple of important trends, and starting by the fact and the observation that more and more we see a growing number of young people that have found themselves working either part-time, doing project-based or precarious work, becoming self-employed, or even delaying their entry into the labor market. So in this unstable and unsecure employment context, there has been a room for the rise of co-working spaces and hubs and other collaborative workspaces, which provide flexible working arrangements in which workers share office and common infrastructure. Antigone identified a couple of trends when it comes to this, and I think that this is also an important part of her piece of work, and that would be interesting also to touch upon later on. The first one, and I think it's also important to underline it, and having Edo here that will help us also understand it a bit better, is that these co-working spaces have been expanding beyond urban areas and beyond, and they are now very visible in the rural and peripheral contexts. And although this has been a trend that was there during the last years, COVID-19 has also accelerated this growth, let's say. So given this possibility of working digitally from mobile in a mobile form, this has fueled immigration waves to peripheral and rural areas. That's the first one. Then the second one is that there is an emergence of a new professional profile, that of the hosts and community managers. And this appears as an appealing career stepping stone for different young people, as those people are the ones that cultivate and animate, let's say, the community, the people that are working. They're the ones that are caring for the people that are working in these spaces, and they are providing the, opportunities for them to interact more and do things together. A third trend that she has identified is the relation between life-work balance. I mean, all those people that are working in this situation with a freelance or entrepreneur, let's say, approach, how do they manage with the childcare? So Adigoni underlines that there are some co-working spaces that have catered for this need, that they have provided nursery facilities, let's say, within the co-working space as such. However, those it's not so easy to maintain as a business model for them, and Adigoni also suggests that there might be a need also for more policy support, institutional level support for this, for finding a solution for this. Finally, and this is also a topic that brings us very close to the two topics that we're going to discuss today, Adigoni identifies a fourth trend, which is related to the emergence of co-living and how it relates to co-working spaces as well. Especially during the pandemic, there has been an increasing number of highly skilled youth workers that have been pushed to seek employment in digital freelance platforms. And at the same time, there have been some countries around Europe, such as Greece, Spain, Estonia, Croatia, and Montenegro, that have introduced a new type of visa addressed to digital nomads. And how can these co-working spaces, which promise a greater life-work balance, in the same time, those co-living spaces emerge as spaces where home can be mobile, and a place of work and a social hub. Of course, the future of co-working spaces is still to be explored. And definitely, Adigoni in her article, she underlines that they would need more policy recognition and concrete public support in order to be able to thrive and to also give a solution to all those challenges that they are facing, young people are facing. Thank you.
And now, continuing on that note, we would like to ask Edo for his view on this. Especially, Antigone in her article has pointed out that one of the trends that Martina just mentioned of co-working is this growing number of such spaces in non-urban areas. So what are your experiences, and what do you think attracts young people to those places? And also, we were wondering if it's really as idyllic as it seems, or are there any obstacles for young people working remotely from non-urban areas?
Thank you, Alexandra. Well, the work has changed in general, and so many people today are working and can work remotely, can work from home, or can work online. And actually right now I could be anywhere in the world doing this talk. And I am traveling through Ecuador, and at the moment I'm quite far from where are you right now, in Portugal, for example. I just came from the jungle in order to connect to the city, in order to connect for this call. And I almost have connected in the jungle but they didn't have very super strong internet, and probably next year it will come there. So I think as the work changes and the people today, especially young people, they can choose where they are working from. They can choose their ideal situation and ideal place to work from. And so it's not surprised that so many people are escaping from urban areas where they are often economically forced to run to the cities. People go from villages to Madrid, to Rome, to Stockholm, to the big capital city just because of work. So many people just because of work, not because of staying in the urban places. So now that work is changing, people are actually deciding what is ideal place for them and where they are going to work from. So And I'm kind of free to state this because we founded Sende 8 years ago, which is the first co-working and co-living space in one tiny village in the mountains of Spain, where by now we hosted more than 3,500 people from 55 nationalities, and there are people from all over the world who can work online, and they choose to go to a tiny village in the middle of nowhere because they feel maybe safer there, they enjoy nature, and they just enjoy being in another setting where they don't have traffic lights, where they don't have a problem with cars or with other urban problems, and they just enjoy the nature and the work equally or even better just because they have access to the internet. So it's very interesting that we are even hosting people from Google, from Netflix, from Council of Europe who come there to write projects, from Amnesty, from UNICEF, from all kind of companies, bigger one or smaller one, and from all kind of profiles of people. We would have lawyers, we would have musicians, we would have project writers, we would have designers, programmers, all kind of industries are now finding their way in order to work online, and then they can actually choose if they are going to work from the beach, from the big city, or from the jungle. And this is all thanks to internet. So right now internet is becoming better and better, and probably soon whole world will have a remote or satellite internet, and they could be connected from anywhere. So I think this is the very important aspect, not just which is very connected to also to mental health of people, to mental health, and why they are actually choosing to some calmer situation or some very calmer settings, because I think 200 years ago people would choose the villages because there was a fertile land there and there was a water. So they said, okay, let's build a base here, let's build a house, and let's work and let's live in this village and let's grow our food. But today people are choosing place where they have good internet and where they feel good. So many people feel good in the smaller place, and they are the ones who are deciding where to live from. And what is also funny that 200 years ago, these villages that were maybe abandoned 60 years ago, these villages would get abandoned because people wouldn't live more from the agriculture. They would move to the cities, and now some other generation can return to this exact same village because they feel good there. And now just with one antenna that they can put on their house, they can just work normally from there. So I think this is we are now living this big movement that is going toward, I believe, non-urban areas, toward the villages or toward the places where we couldn't imagine that someone would return.
That is a very interesting trend, and it's good to hear also from somebody that is experiencing this on the ground. And I think that, as you said, in the following years we will see how it evolves. But it's definitely something to keep in mind, and as you said, like a choice perhaps especially for younger people, and that will definitely change the geography, let's say, of urban and non-urban life right now. Pete, we would like to address a question to you as well. So Antigone, in her article, she's identifying those trends that we mentioned before. Many of them are very much related to life-work balance and social rights. Okay, so decent job conditions. She was also questioning, also if this appealing profession of community host in a co-working space is decent or is long-term. So she was questioning those things. She underlined the need for childcare facilities and provision of facilities for childcare for those that are working, regardless their employment status, and for flexible working styles. And she also underlined the issue of affordable housing options. Of course, sometimes, all those co-working spaces are promoted as spaces that can give answers to all these challenges. However, what do you think, what kind of support would be needed from a policy level in your perspective?
Thank you, Martina, for this question. I think it's quite important, whatever we put forward, to be based on evidence and data. And I think the work that has been done on this level helps a lot, both us as representatives of citizens and civil society, but also the institutions, to really build up a framework, not on short-term solutions that we have seen in the past, but really on policies and frameworks that can have a long-term vision on one side, but also be long-lasting. And that's the main issues we have seen. Some of the points of the answer that I will give are based on data, like our the YFJ research report called Beyond Lockdown, the Pandemic's Scar on Youth. But also we have been cooperating with the Housing Europe Observatory and Fondazione Abe Pierre when it comes to the sixth overview of housing exclusion in Europe. And basically what we have and data that we have are not very promising. As well as on the paper you said, with the long-term effects and issues, we get to see, for example, on the issues of employment, that we have a lot of increase in unemployment and loss of work, especially during the pandemic period since 2020, and particularly affected people are the youth, are young people. What we have seen is that almost 12% of youth workers are stopped working, either from losing their job or due to working hours being reduced to zero, with a lot of services and sectors being closed, or with the openings and closings not having a secure perspective on the matters of your employment, which that connects as well to young people that study, so education, or the progress of education in general, when we think about children in school and how they see their future and being affected with online learning, hybrid learning, all this instability. And when it comes to employment specifically, we have a set of recommendations which basically need to focus on quality. We have seen since 2008 a very incoherent and a very short-term perspective when it comes to policy development. And I think now with 2020, 2021, there is no level of excuse or lack of engagement by policymakers and governments in creating something that will be stable and really putting, avoiding relaxing labor legislations that we have seen in the past, having better regulating transitions, literally from education and the advancements we're seeing now in education into employment, which brings as well the connection with adequate wages, fair working conditions, and really investing in quality entry-level jobs that can support youth. What we can also see is that providing incentives to employers to hire young people with coveted financial support should be conditional to the compliance with minimum quality standards that can really set a path towards relevant and stable employment for young people. Another recommendation that we suggest is ensuring access to social protection and income support. So we make sure that someone's employment status or age does not result in lack of social security, which has been a core issue when about the topic we talked today, like overall for young people, that you need to show your long-term working while you just entered the labor force, or that your age will be a factor into how you're protected socially, that the level of contributions you didn't have the time or the experience to build in affects how included or supported are by your state. Another crucial element that we see is that making much better use of existing policies and funding instruments is really important, and we're happy to see the new reinforced youth guarantee from the EU, but also the EU recovery funds, which are to an extent consistent amount of resources. Nevertheless, a complaint, or let's say a reflection we have on the recovery fund is that on the process in really defining the youth aspects of this fund, young people were not included. We have thankfully some cases of member states reaching out to young people, reaching out to the youth councils or members, but in most cases that was not the process, that was not the case. From my country, Cyprus, that I see a National Youth Council which is very active. Nevertheless, when I saw the plan from Cyprus, I could tell that youth was not involved as it should be. And it feels a little bit sometimes that we talk about young people, that we talk about their engagement, but it feels to the extent that it's tokenistic. That yes, I see two young people standing there or giving the hand to the policymakers, But at the end of the core part of change making, we don't see young people being taken seriously. Moving on, I really want to thank Edo because mental health is, even if we talk about these issues, mental health is core to this overall discussion, because we need to understand that after a pandemic, after a health crisis, we also need to be aware about a pandemic of mental health issues, and that we need to break the taboo. Because seeing myself when I was unemployed, being able at home, sitting down without having any aspect or being stressed about if I would be able to pay my rent or not, it wasn't so motivating to check for work. I was like, okay, but would this work make sense? Do I feel the profile? But I'm overskilled, but I don't have enough experience. And all this stress was creating really a negative impact on my side. And on the other hand, I didn't know who to speak to. I didn't know who in the country I live or back home I can contact and say, I'm not doing well, while I also need to find a job. And this is the reality for a lot of young people across Europe, which affects really their engagement in labor market, their educational aspects, if they can really participate in learning, and on the other side, in their aspect of well-being. But I will not go further on the parts, but I will really say the recommendations that we need to focus on providing increased access to information and around mental health and services, increase mental health literacy. We need to really focus on mental health services and actually make them available for young people. We need to recognize the link between mental health and other socioeconomic factors and better address them in policymaking. We cannot provide solutions if we're not aware of the overall part of problems. By providing only good job opportunities, while young people don't have really the power to exit their house or to really invest in their well-being, that will not be their priority. And last, coming on the part of housing, I'd like to see that, I'd like to see from our side in the report, and I'll be closing with this, Martina, sorry.
No, just thinking that maybe we can touch upon this recommendation after we listen on the housing article. I think it would make more sense, Pete. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Alexandra?
Well, that is my general point. I really feel that if you see employment and the social aspects of it are one side, but they're always interconnected factors: education, well-being, mental health, and at the end of the day, really making our policies useful. We were in a youth dialogue conference, and person said, a youthless policy is a useless policy, and I fully agree with that statement.
Thank you very much, Pete, for your valuable input. And you actually touch upon several things that are also mentioned in the second article we are going to present now. And it definitely also shows this correlation between all these issues that we touched upon. So employment and mental health and housing. And then we also add the extra layer of the pandemic to it. So how vulnerable are young people in general, and then especially during and after the pandemic. So we are going to explore now this perspective of housing from the perspective of this article that was written by Chloe Serme-Morin from FEANSA, and it talks about access to independence and this housing exclusion. So as the title of the article says, why we shouldn't leave young people on the front line of Europe's dysfunctional housing markets. So basically in her article, Chloe explores several different aspects that are particularly connected to young people. So how are young people affected by housing exclusion? So she talks about how young people routinely struggle to leave the family home or their caregiving institution, or end up returning to live there. So for example, in Denmark, the number of young people boomeranging back to their parents' house increased by 12% between 2009 and 2018. And there are many more stats that she also refers to in the article. She also talks about how young people pay especially high rents. So in some capital cities, There is the average rent for a 2-room apartment that can represent more than 100% of the median income for people aged 18 to 24. This is the case, for example, in Amsterdam, Helsinki, and Lisbon, not forgetting, of course, cities like London, Paris, and Barcelona that Chloe refers to also in her article. She also talks about how young people live in poor quality housing and how they, for example, experience energy poverty or forced cohabitation. In the European Union, according to Chloe's article, some 23% of 15 to 29-year-olds were living in overcrowded conditions in 2019, compared to 15.6% of the general population. And the situation is also very alarming in non-EU countries. For example, in Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, more than 2 out of 3 young 15 to 29-year-olds were living in overcrowded conditions in 2019, according to Eurostat. Chloe also touches upon how housing exclusion is the result of the pandemic. So actually, she also refers to the report that you mentioned, Pete, that is the 6th overview of housing exclusion in Europe in 2021, and it shows that the social safety nets and the emergency measures taken by governments during the pandemic are not sufficient to protect young people, and that 1 out of 3 young people who lost their work and income during the pandemic are facing severe difficulties in maintaining or accessing a home. But also, not to be just in this pessimistic perspective, Chloe also touches upon different innovative solutions that exist. She calls for more innovation and solutions to be brought by governments and different institutions, but she also presents some very interesting ones that actually help with this situation. So whether we are talking about this cooperative housing, like for example Porto 15, that is this public housing for people under 35 in Bologna, where some apartments were renovated in an apartment building belonging to the municipality, with shared services and communal spaces, where the young tenants who pay this below average rent sign up to this values charter, in which they commit to serving the community, for example, by organizing activities, homework support, park maintenance, and so on. She also mentioned, for example, this municipal co-living programs shared between young unaccompanied refugees and young local people in Amsterdam and Antwerp, for instance, that proves that intercultural shared living spaces provide living conditions in which a variety of informal forms of social support and mutual learning can emerge. And some other examples can also be found in Chloe's article, which we very much invite you to read. And we would now like to also refer to some of these points in the questions to our guests.
So Pete, maybe we can come back to you, and I think this is a moment also for you to tackle what is your vision when it comes, to this policy level needs and requests when it comes to the housing conditions of young people. Just before giving you the floor, I would also like to remind, as Alexandra also underlined, that almost 3 million young people under 25 were unemployed until February 2021, which is an increase of 230 since the start of the pandemic. And 1 out of 3 people who lost their work and income during the pandemic are facing severe difficulties in maintaining or assessing a home, as Chloe mentioned, and also Alexandra. Chloe refers to this in her article. So you touched upon in your previous answer to the Youth Forum, let's say, what kind of policies the Youth Forum would like to see in terms of employment. Perhaps now it's the moment also to discuss and think about what kind of policies would the European Forum would like to see in place for young people's housing conditions to improve.
Well, just before we mention about the policy, I think a vital part to mention beyond the parts of the report is that the pandemic really developed the aspects of digital and from house working, from house learning, which for the many young people who are homeless that was not just an effect on their health, like to be protected, which I still have a question, or we still have a question, young people, like when we say stay at home or quarantine as a homeless person, how do you support me in really achieving and protecting my health? And I think that's one of the core issues that member states beyond EU or within the EU did not really think about when they was giving stay-at-home instructions. But other part that we see is that it really affects your development as when we don't talk or when we don't address decent living conditions. And that's the key part, decent. Our recommendation when it comes to the policies is basically understanding overall that we need to enable young people within the EU, but also to the Council of Europe and the work being done across member states, that we need to really support and engage them in access of decent, adequate, and affordable housing. That is the first point. Then in all parts we mentioned before, education, employment, etc., we really need to provide the aspects needed to have a smooth transition to independence, and social emancipation must be the priority of all of us and the institutions. Because if we keep investing in one core pillar and we don't in the other, we don't have coherence of policy, we don't have really a cross-sectorial approach on the whole part when it comes to housing. Other possible actions that we find very vital are measures to promote access to housing in the youth guarantee. It's very important when you talk about youth employment to understand that housing is a vital part of this process of becoming independent and finding the job that you really feel that you can advance in. Better cooperation between the youth care sector, the homelessness, and social housing sectors is key in particularly preventing homelessness for young people, and that they are not left outside the healthcare, especially during a pandemic. I think that's a vital point. Supporting renting can be ensured through housing allowances or rent deposits schemes that can help young people access rental accommodation by guaranteeing the rental deposit, like in Sweden with this kind of independent supporting approach. And last, to prioritize support for integrated and long-term strategies in the fight against housing exclusion, encourage sharing good practices and transforming emerging management into long-term solutions based on the universality of the right to housing. I think in our side, at least from the work that our member organizations are doing, but also seeing the focus of institutions is really addressing social issues, like with the convention, at least in the social summit in Porto from the side of the EU, but also the work being done on the like thinking about local and regional authorities from the Council of Europe, but also the recommendations on the access of youth rights from the past. I think there is the framework or the opportunities ahead. The thing is how we use them, and what really we're skeptic or try to be more critical on is that we acknowledge the short-term memory of human beings when it comes to problems. And we have seen this in 2008, we have seen this in 2012, we now see it again 1 year after the pandemic. So we hope that this is the case of the past, and that we don't fall again into the really neglecting participation. We acknowledge the democratic deficits, also moving a little bit away, that the pandemic has stressed or really allowed to develop, but still this is about who we are and who we can become. And I think that is an intergenerational aspect in it, but also a multi-stakeholders aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete, for also opening up this question and touching upon various elements. And I think this is really a conversation we could be having for much more than this hour or so that we have planned for this webinar. But thank you also for taking out these main points that we really hope will inspire further conversation and further action on this topic. And we would also, coming back to this topic of housing and this challenge or the exclusion that young people are facing when it comes to housing, we would like to address the next question to Edo, and basically to ask you, in your experience, would you consider that this co-living model in rural areas, such as the one you have in Spain, in Sende, could be one of the answers to this housing challenge for young people? Or is it perhaps more of a temporary solution? How do you see that?
Maybe just very quickly, I will put in context like what is actually co-working and co-living. I'm sure that some people are not maybe familiar with it. So most of people know what is co-working space. Usually there are spaces located in the big cities where people share a desk. And so anyone who works online can go there, buy a desk for a day or for a month and work from there, like office, but with random people. And the co-working and co-living is the same, but with beds. People come, they sleep there, and they can stay, for example, in our space, people come and they stay for 1 month. They work there, but also we cook together, we dine together, we do excursion together. We basically do life together. We are becoming friends during 1 month. But in the morning, everyone wakes up, they go and they work on their projects. And I believe this is one very good solution for like recovering the villages. And when we speak about housing solution, I believe that our model is maybe not the right solution, because there are also co-living spaces that they rent for 1 year. But I would say that the better solution, in my opinion, is kind of hybrid of our model, and it's called co-housing, some kind of even hybrid of co-housing model. And co-housing is a term where, for example, 5 friends or 10 friends, they chip in the money, they put money together, and they buy 1, 2, or 3 houses in a village, or they build the houses, and then everyone has their own space. But at the same time, they build a communal space where they, for example, co-working space where they can work remotely from, or they can have a communal garden, or they can have a communal car, or they can have even communal kindergarten or school for their children. So it's kind of a more hybrid space, which is a long term. They can do like this for 10 years or 20 years or forever. And today what is cool that for a price, for example, in Chloe's article, she stated some prices, monthly rent in Lisbon, Amsterdam, London. So basically for a monthly price of renting apartment, a room in London, we can buy whole house or land in so many countries in the world. Me personally, I live in the house which we bought for 1,500 euros. At the same time, my friend was paying 1,500 euros for a month with 6 people in London. So just to put it in perspective. And even if I would pay taxi forever to go to the city, it would be cheaper than living in the London. So I believe this is the internet. Again, I will mention internet because it's bringing closer the villages and the remote areas, which are, in my opinion, are going to become kind of logical and the healthier trend in the future. So people who have this group of friends who can buy a house or land, they can also build a tool workshop, and they can build their own houses from wood or from wherever, and can be way more cheaper, very more healthier, and way better organized society than the one that we are having today. So for this, what we need is actually one thing, in my opinion, and that's the remote work, and how we can actually get this, how we can earn money so we can live in the village by making money from internet. And I think this is the big thing that is also coming, like one of the big trends that will come in the future. And also we from Sende, we started one project which is called Village Nomads, where we are, because we saw that so many friends of ours who live in our village or near our villages, they live in Madrid, in Barcelona, and they love coming to our village. So they come almost every 2 weeks. They do 1,000 kilometers or 3-4 hours traveling just to be 2 days in their village. Then they come back to make money to survive. So we were thinking, okay, how we can teach these people some skills, some craft, online craft, so they can stay in the village, work remotely, and stay and choose where they are going to live from, maybe from their hometown, from their home village. So that's why we are starting with this program, where we are deconstructing what digital nomads do. We sit with Ivan from Bulgaria, from Kasia from Wales, and we say, okay, please open your laptop. Can you help us to deconstruct what actually you are typing on this laptop? What are you doing? So we can translate this in some easy tutorial and teach people maybe to repeat, to do the same, so they can also work online. Working online before was big mystery. It was kind of some kind of even look like a scam, but it's not anymore. Like, we all use these advanced phones, we all use the advanced programs, and there are so many people who need to program them and to build them. So like, there is, I would say now, almost unlimited market for online work, and we cannot educate enough people so they can support all these systems. So this is some obvious trend that we see right now, and I hope so many people will also see it, and so many people will actually switch and maybe work online so they can live from wherever they want. And so many people will choose rural areas that were kind of abandoned at the moment, and then it will start totally another circle. Thank you.
What I like from our today's session is that we have two representatives, like we have Pito and Edo, that are really having a different discourse. And I like very much that we have Pete touching upon, policies, advocacy needs in those issues, and Edo giving us a picture of what happens in reality, what happens on the ground, how do young people actually experience those new trends. So this is something that I really like. And I think that it has been very rich to listen to both of you, and thank you also for reading the articles, referring to them when we were addressing the questions to you. I think it was important to have an understanding of what we have been trying to do with this webinar today. This is the time as well, if you want, let me share my screen, if you want to jump to questions from the audience. As Lana has written in the chat, you have two options to do that. You can either write on the chat or on the Q&A function that you see. But in the meantime, perhaps maybe this is the moment as well to see among us, maybe Pete or Edo, you want to ask something each other, or you want to make another comment based on what we've heard the last almost an hour we've been together. Yes, Pete.
First, I really like to thank Edo about the last comments made in his statement. I think it's very important for us to really stay vigilant on the parts of online working, and really the opportunities are there from working from home really have an impact on mental health because of this work-life balance. And I was so happy to see the legislation from Portugal, because it is time to really integrate this part of where is the limits of I start working from my choice from this time till this time, but then I also dedicate, or I put time and I focus a part of my day on my personal development, on having my break, on having my the time that I don't check my emails or that I don't get notifications, which of course as well I think we see from technological development that these things are being integrated from the tangible things, the devices. But it's also important that us as stakeholders, but also the labor market, understands that you're not more productive because you work X hours, but you're more productive when you really invest your time when you work, and that you have the time to rest and really invest on your personal development, which I think also from the examples you mentioned, you also highlight that part of really developing the people and having them happy of where they are. So rural areas and urban areas have this opportunity to create a balance and an exchange of people, not of necessity that I have to leave to go somewhere, but because I want to live somewhere.
You want to reply on this?
I completely agree that it's like so today we are discussing a lot about what is better, working remotely, working from home, working from anywhere, or working from the office. And I think the best is the personal choice of every person, that we decide where we feel good and where we can work from. And I would say what Pete was mentioning about mental health. So one curious thing of what happened in Sende, that we are located basically in the mountain where we didn't have very good internet for 5 years. Now we are operating 8 years, but 5 years we had very, very terrible internet. But it was interesting, and we were hosting people who work online, digital nomads. And it was very curious that less than 3% of cancellation we had because of bad internet connection, which is weird. Usually, I would say no one will come if the internet not good. But what we realized is that these people who work online, they search for something else. So they can work from anywhere, but mostly they search, maybe is it friendship, is it a community, is it like a place where they will feel calm. So it's kind of internet was not the obstacle to come to our place, and I think it's very connected with mental health and the place where we feel good, where we feel better. So I think it's something important to think on. And also maybe just I will also refer to diagram that you shared before when you mentioned coworking and the childcare, and I would also add one more point there. Like with this co-housing and homeschooling, I also believe that it will be a big thing, homeschooling in the future, because all this new generation of digital nomads, they will never come back to live and to work in the office. Once they see one choice, other become obsolete. So also these people, we are now in the first generation of digital nomads, which is in the last 10 years of these people. So they're mostly young, from 24 to 38 years old. So a lot of them will have families, and they will have children. So they will search for a base, but probably they will not settle. So I think there will be big trend and progress in homeschooling, which kind of will follow some modern curriculums, where we can have maybe here in front 10 kids from Thailand to France to United States, and they will all be together. They will maybe follow same or similar curriculum with one person another digital nomad who will maybe teach them, or they will follow something online, but they will be maybe in the one village or in some beach, and they will get this proper homeschooling, which in my opinion will be much better than than traditional schooling that we are having today. So I think that's another big space that will come in the future, that will show up, and that will be big trend. And probably it will be much better in the future to educate person or kid in this kind of environment than in the traditional homeschooling, than in traditional schooling where kids are I don't know, 100 years ago. They're following the same curriculum. So I think this is another element that is very interesting to investigate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also like that you're really future looking. I think that's what we also want to tackle with this series. So it's great that you give this insight. I was wondering, both Pete and Edo, like we're using so much this word before co-housing, co-living, co-working. What is this? Like, why is it so important nowadays? Or what does this mean to you? Pete, you want to start?
Sure. I think the co-aspect is really showing our development as society. We did pass through several crises, not only COVID, when it comes to disconnecting or in the negative aspect, disengaging, and we've seen the results of it. And I think nowadays, if I see the topics that we work with Youth Forum, but also like the topics that are coming up in the agenda globally, regionally, locally, it's all about the co and the intergenerational cooperation, co-working, co-management, etc. Like thinking all these aspects means that you cannot excel when you try to do things by yourself and without acknowledging what other people do. I'm working with one of the organizations, Youth for Exchange and Understanding, and we're putting together a publication for change makers. And core part of that aspect of you leading change is understanding your community, investing in a team, and really building together, constructing together the change you want to see, the solutions, the approaches, everything. And core part for our work as Youth Forum as well is the rights-based approach, that if we wish to address any problem of our world or our community, we need to make sure that these people are part of that conversation, are part of creating the solution, and are able to follow up on this part. And I think through the different processes and grassroots level work is like, you see that the co is the key part that really leads to the future, that we do it together. Is it online or in person or hybrid? I personally think that hybrid is the best option, because it allows you to participate if you wish to physically, not ignoring the complementary vision of the online, but I think the physical is core to our work. And on the other part, it makes it more inclusive, because there are people who cannot do things with having lack of mobility, for example, or other difficulties. And that also gives the co-part and the together, that you don't need to really stay back because of incapacities or incapabilities, but together we can do things better.
If I also may add, I would completely agree with Pete, and I believe that so when I speak with other people about co-living space in Sende, everyone thinks that our business is our business is renting houses, renting internet, and renting beds, renting accommodation. But actually, we are in the business of combating loneliness of people who travel the world. So what they want is this co. They want community. So a lot of people who go tomorrow to Beijing or to Madrid, even though they are million inhabitants cities, people would feel lonely there because maybe they don't have friends there. So what we are actually selling is the friendship. When people come, they leave their backpack, we show them the spaces, they go down to the kitchen, we give them knife and the onion, they start chopping, speaking with people, drink a beer, and in the first night they maybe met 20 other people from another countries. And that's, so I think this part of co is actually related with community, with belonging somewhere where not somewhere where we are going to stay and dine and cook together, but place where we can grow personally. So I think that's very important element. So, for example, in our space, we have almost every week 3 to 4 head talks, which is like TED Talk with the head, where everyone can share what they are skilled in. Or so also in our dinners, in our free time. So there is a lot of free time where actually we are just learning from each other. So, for example, for me personally, last 8 years in Sende was like a master class. Was 10 times better than my university, just by staying there and listening what these people who are traveling the world know and what they share. And I think the co is this part where we can find the friends, where we can find the support, where we can talk to someone, but also where we can learn from each other. And it's not a new thing, it's since from forever. So I think this also physical, now we speak a lot about online thing, but as Pete says, I think it will be very important. We will always coming back to the physical contact and staying in the same room with the same people, being under the same light or in front of the same fire, and just share. So I think this is the big part. And today, who knows how to make community online or offline, and I think it's the one of the best skills maybe in this social business in 2021.
Thank you, Edo, and thank you, Pete. And I think it's very interesting that you're coming back to this community and actually mentioning how this is something that was done before. We are actually coming back to it and doing it again, and maybe calling it a different name. But speaking also of community, we would also like to touch upon also the social inclusion that also Pete has mentioned in his previous answer. And we are talking about access, right, to rights, to different rights. And if we're talking here about this co-working, co-living, Edo, you have mentioned many times this digital nomads trend and how this is accessible to everyone. And our question would be, is this really accessible to everyone? How do young people from maybe less privileged backgrounds have access to this? You know, how do they have information about this? How do they have the tools and the knowledge to actually be a part And how do we ensure that we are really representative and inclusive when we are talking about this subject? So maybe we can start with Edo and then move on with Pete.
And that's a very good question. I think like any other aspects in the village, like it's all of this is more common to the kind of more privileged societies where people can actually risk to become digital nomads, and if they fail, they can come back in their safe space. So world is not equal, and this is right now this is also case with the digital nomadism. But in my opinion, there is much less friction today that to enter in this world than before. So today we can download 3 specific courses or this village nomad tutorial where there is like kind of compressed tiny niche career of one person, and maybe we can replicate it and we can test it almost for free and from anywhere, even with bad internet. So I believe that it's still we are still far away to reach so many places with this open education, but at the same time, I think it was never in the history easier to learn something very advanced, even from the tiny house in the middle of nowhere where people only like I don't know, like these days I would see so many villages where they would say internet connection, and it's like the house made of the mud with donkeys in front, with very difficult even where people don't have a ticket to go to the bigger city, they cannot afford $1 American dollar to pay the bus to go to the big city, but they somehow managed to bring internet there. So I think it's the more like there is need for just better education, how we Google online, how we search for information, and how we can teach people like to not put selfies online, not waste time of the internet and put to maybe show their selfies, but to go on Wikipedia, to go to see some courses, or to like focus and maybe build their career where they can do something online. We are still far from there, but I would repeat it. The world is not equal, so it's not easy. But I believe also it's the easiest way that we can send information to the middle of nowhere by internet. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edo. And we would now like to invite Pete to also give his thoughts on this.
Thank you very much. I think when it comes first to the less privileged backgrounds, when I was talking earlier, I mentioned the importance of right-based approach and really working with a diversity of stakeholders. And I think another part is the intersectional approach. Understanding first how different parts of our identities are working as obstacles for us to engage, and then the stakeholders really working with these groups to understand how can I provide information. I really like Edu's approach on the online and the really forward-looking aspect, but there is a risk there. In the process of forward-looking, forgetting who's behind already, and also letting more people being left back already with what we're seeing, like in the social exclusion parts of today with the pandemic, other health issues, and really living standard issues. I think it's quite important to, while we have this aspect integrated, it's very important to have really, I posted something on the chat earlier, like infrastructure is key. We really need to understand how do we provide infrastructure with not prioritizing based on area, but really across the board. Access to internet, access to housing, quality working conditions. These things all together really help reach out to the less privileged, because if you really provide infrastructure, but also involved with social workers, educators in the formal and non-formal sector, it's really how you spread the information and how you really support the information providers in providing quality information. And that is something on the education part that Edu said is really important as well, to invest in digital literacy. It's not about you if you have access to the technology. I think if we really invest in youth spaces, in civil society, we have learned, especially during the pandemic, how to provide and how to engage with young people of lessened fortunes but also other age groups. And it's quite important to understand that our responsibility and knowledge is part of the process. We're not here to be engaged so we tick boxes in a consultation, or we're not here at the last minute of the row or at the last minute of a process when numbers are not fulfilled, when achievements have not been met, to say, okay, we need to reach out to organizations because we're lacking on the things that they were put as targets or the thing that they were put as goals. We're talking about a development of a society. And we need to acknowledge that civil society and other stakeholders are a part of this. And I think that's how we can really be inclusive as well. Understanding that we are not experts of everything. That's why we have diversity of stakeholders, diversity of organizations, diversity of people being engaged and wishing to be engaged. And by allowing and providing the spaces, and I think Council of Europe has a perfect model, if not perfect, an excellent model of achieving this with the co-management model, really bringing a diversity of stakeholders and policymakers, including young people as equals, in really creating an inclusive environment. And I think that we can all learn from this. Inclusion is not a thing to achieve, it's a process. So we always need to make sure that we allow this process to grow, and that we always look back at it to make sure that it's a process that works.
Thank you, Pete. We have one question from our attendees. So Nika Paxoliani asking, what are policy solutions towards better housing for young people on the local and national levels? And perhaps if we have any good examples from public policy. I'm not sure how aware you might be on this because it's very country or local level specific. However, if you have any ideas what policy solutions can be proposed or are available or are actually happening regarding better housing for young people on the local and national levels. Edo, you know?
I don't know if it's the answer on the question, but there were some experiments in, for example, in Italy, where some mayors would give a house for free or for €1 to anyone who would come back to live there, who will repair the house and make life there. So I think this went in bit in misdirection, where also a lot of opportunists would use this opportunity and maybe take this house. But I think this kind of model could work, where for example, where mayors could provide houses in the villages for people for very cheap in order if they come back. And I know that there is one example from Portugal. Maybe Alexandra knows better about the village, about the small town, but there is one mayor, kind of forward-looking mayor, who brought a very modern coding school in the village and provided free education for young people from this village, so they would provide them maybe 5,000 to 10,000 euros boot camp for programming, but with I believe with requirement that they stay in the village and work from there. And I think this is a wonderful example that is happening already, and it works. And this project works already for a few years. And I think these kind of programs are very, very nice solution, because if people have money, they can also afford to stay in the village. They can afford to build their house, and they can. I always mention village because right now villages are much cheaper to be in, and the connections with the cities are much better than before. So I believe this is one of the way that can work.
Answering a little bit on the question, I think there's a diversity of good and bad practices. When it comes to local and national level, I think really empowering and working with local authorities and regional authorities helps provide solutions, like the example in Italy that was mentioned by Edu. But I think also the Netherlands have a very good example that really builds on an intergenerational aspect, that houses for elderly people really provide space for young people, and the only thing they need to cover or pay, let's say, is the time and socializing within the premises, or and really co-sharing the space with older people, which I think is something that we really need as well, like to see this type of different solutions, these different types of interactions and supporting between different generations, as you start building your independence. I think that's not something that I would do at my age, but when you're young and you have such an opportunity, and I've seen this working with a lot of Dutch youth, is that you're being introduced to a different aspect of seeing life, and it's a matter of building such a culture on one hand, but it is partially a solution. Nevertheless, we shouldn't let states, like countries or regional authorities, find only these type of solutions, which they basically take their hands up from quality jobs, from allowing really opportunities with legislation or programs, with housing allowances, rent deposits, by saying we have elderly's house for you to stay in. That's for some people, and for others are, because if I think people with disabilities, they always are excluded in the process of understanding how they can themselves become independent and live with a dignity of life. So you cannot say to that person that they really can personally find and really invest on what is good for them to have a quality living standard, and tell them go to an elderly's house and it's no rent there. For example, there's a diversity of users, and we need to make sure that stakeholders and policymakers acknowledge that diversity and engage with that diversity of background in order to make sure that both locally, urban or rural, as Edu said, but also nationally, it gets to provide a response as now things and money. I don't think the money, at least for the EU, for sure for the EU, but less for the Council of Europe, would be an issue with all the plans that governments have put forward. Now it's our side as citizens as well to really acknowledge the opportunities of the restrictions and engage with the stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Pete and Edo. And as Martina mentioned earlier, it's very interesting that you're bringing these different perspectives of this more advocacy and policy level and this more grassroots level. Nonetheless, we see in both of you a lot of passion for actually all of these things that you're saying, which I really think makes this conversation rich. And we would just like to, also referring to Nika's question, once again invite you all to read also Chloe's article on housing exclusion, where she also presents actually some she calls for innovative solutions, but she also presents some actual examples of things that do exist out there related to these small affordable housing units, this intergenerational multicultural housing that was also mentioned by some of the guest speakers. So these examples from Antwerp, from Bologna. So you can also read about them in the article that you can see also on our Facebook event, as well as on Perspectives on Youth page, and it was also shared here on the chat on Zoom. So we also very much invite you to look there for some of the solutions, and then there are definitely many others out there that can be very inspiring and innovative.
Before closing, perhaps we give the floor to Lana.
Thank you, Martina. I really enjoyed the discussion and the different points raised by our speakers, and thank you very much for being part of the webinar. We were supposed to have two other guests today as well, and I'm sure they would have enriched the discussion also, but I think also giving this space to two people to really share very different ways of functioning within the world today it was really important. I really like the fact that we emphasize today kind of the diversity of young people's lived experiences, because this is also what the Perspective series is all about. I think some of the important questions that we can take from this discussion, because Perspective is supposed to leave us with the questions rather than answers. Then, as Edo mentioned, we need to then start looking for answers ourselves online. For me, it is this holistic approach or holistic living that Pete was mentioning a few times about young people. So focusing on social rights, focusing not only on housing and co-working, but also thinking how all these things are then linked also with our mental health and well-being, as well as the digital world that we are all part of now. So when we speak about social rights of young people, for me now this conversation also brings up many more questions about different groups of young people and different rights in terms of the access. We invite you again to have a look at the articles, not only these two. We have a whole section on social rights on our website, which also covers topics that some of the things that Pete mentioned, for example, on youth homelessness. And there were also some studies done by others that we have received in comments on Facebook. This topic will continue within our own research, and also the correlated and linked topics such as that of well-being are already in planning and in process. So we really look forward to having the conversations and the dialogue on this also in the coming years. I would really like to take this opportunity to thank not only the two speakers, but also Alexandra and Martina for the great work in preparing this webinar and working on the articles. It is really much appreciated. And yeah, stay tuned to our website, to our social media, and we'll be sharing more about similar topics and also new things that are coming up in the youth field.
Thank you, Lana. And before we close with actually the lovely graphic facilitation we will show you of this webinar, we also wanted to just give space for final remarks from Edo and Pete. If there is anything you would like to touch upon that you feel we haven't, or anything you would like to leave us with, while we are seeing on the screen this amazing drawings and words together combined by our graphic facilitator Paul Dimitru, that was with us following the whole conversation of the webinar. So thank you very much for this lovely representation, Paul, and I would just now like to give the floor to Edo and Pete for some final remarks.
I love the illustration, and I just took a screenshot so I can save it. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I would just like to thank you for speaking about this. I think this is such a big and important topic that doesn't have enough space in the public discourse, and I just believe that we will speak more about this, because solutions are there, internet connection is there, and we can do so many things, but it's still difficult to send out information, like proper information, and to separate the noise from the real thing. So I believe that just by sharing, by doing open source projects where we can share what we know and for free, and allow people access to these kind of tools and education, can do a lot. Thank you very much for organizing this, and I really enjoyed and hold this professional organization. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Edo, and thank you from my side as well for this excellent organization. And from our side, what I have to say is that there are 3 points that we really need to be careful for when it comes to these topics. One, we need a long-term vision and make sure that our responses and policies also focus on the long-term impact. To achieve that as well, we need to make sure that we need, as a second point, meaningful youth participation. We really need to make sure that we support and we develop methods to engage with young people, but also for them to get engaged and have them involved in all different aspects and levels of policy making. At the beginning with the consultations, etc., in the drafting, in the creation, in the implementation, and the evaluation and follow-up. It's very important that we acknowledge their diversity and we make sure that there's spaces and channels for them to engage. And last, and I think it's the most important overall, is the cross-sectorial and intersectional approach. We need to make sure that different stakeholders from different levels and different fields are part of this conversation and work being done, especially now that the investment, at least, or focus of it for investment is there, but also to make sure that different dimensions of our lives are interconnected. We cannot neglect or disregard these parts. And of course, as we all started with evidence and data, make sure that all this combines with analysis and with research, which is very, very important, especially now on the day of misinformation and misleading information. I think research and science can really be vital in putting things forward in a very coherent way and very evidence-based way. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much once more, and thank you to all the people that were following the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Edo. I just want to add that with Paul, he has read all the articles. He was the one that also did the illustrations for each of the 2 articles that you can find on the Perspectives on Youth webpage. And he asked us in his preparation this morning, what is the truth that we should be aware of, at the end of this webinar, so that he would be a bit more prepared. And I think that you gave us so much inspiration and so many insights on different truths that we would like to keep out of this webinar, that as Lana said, this is going to continue as a reflection. And I also would like to thank the Youth Partnership for being forward, to also take the lead in such discussions. I think it's very important. Thank you, Lana. Thank you to your colleagues. And thank you to all our attendees. Thank you for the questions. Hopefully you will hear from the Perspective series again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.